Funny, isn't it? A man can work 30 years, wake up every morning with an alarm he hates, show up to a job he barely tolerates, do everything he's told, and still end up with nothing to show for it but a drawer full of old name tags and a quiet, aching fear. He's not lazy, he's not stupid, but somehow the math still doesn't add up. He's tired, not just in the body, but in the mind, in the spirit, because something inside him always hoped this year will be different, but it never is. And he can't explain why. You know what that is? That's the quiet prison of what I call the salary waiting mentality. No bars, no guards, but it holds millions of people in place, all over the world. They're not poor because they don't earn. They're poor because they never own. Not their time, not their value, not their future. They just wait. Wait for Friday. Wait for the 1st or the 15th. Wait for HR to process payroll. Wait for someone else to feed them the fruit of their own labor while they hand over the tree. You see it all around you, don't you? People who live only in between paychecks, not building anything, not planning beyond the next deposit, just hoping the money outlasts the month. And when it runs out, which it always does, they shrink. They cancel dinners. They avoid messages. They stretch leftovers and excuses. They disappear until the next salary saves them. Just in time. Then, like clockwork, they go out, spend quick, breathe deep, and start the waiting all over again. Tell me, is that a life? Or is that a slow-motion cycle of dependency? You weren't born for that. You weren't meant to trade 5 days of soul for 2 days of rest. You weren't built to live like a faucet, turned on and off by someone else's hand. But somewhere along the way, you learned to wait, not to create, not to invest, not to grow, just to wait. And maybe nobody ever told you it was a trap, because they were in it too. Your father waited. Your mother counted days. Your teachers taught obedience, not freedom. You thought that was normal. But normal doesn't mean healthy. Normal doesn't mean wise. It just means common. And poverty loves the common path. Now here you are, grown, capable, still waiting, still treating your income like a gift from above instead of a harvest from within. Let me ask you something. What happens when you depend on one stream, one gate, one person? You lose your power. You become smaller than your potential. Because deep down, you're afraid of losing your source. So you settle. You comply. You stay quiet when you should speak. You nod when you should walk away, not because you're weak, but because your bills are louder than your backbone, and no one blames you. Not here. I just want you to see it, clearly, without shame. Because until you name the prison, you'll keep decorating the cell. You'll keep calling it security, when really it's stagnation. You'll keep saying, "At least I have a job," when you should be asking, "Why don't I own anything yet?" Because wealth isn't what you're paid. It's what you keep, what you grow, what you control. A salary is a starting point, but too many have mistaken it for a destination. And they've stopped walking, stopped building, stopped asking questions. Questions like, why do I keep living for the next deposit? Why do I wait for permission to enjoy my own life? Why does my peace rise and fall with the balance of my bank account? That's not wealth. That's dependence dressed in direct deposit. But you don't have to stay there. You don't have to wait your life away. There's another rhythm, slower at first, but truer. The rhythm of ownership, of seeds planted, not just hours traded, of value created, not just time filled, of income that flows because you designed it that way, Not because someone processed it on a spreadsheet. But before you reach that, you have to see where you are. You have to face this. If you wake up only to wait for money, you are not free. You are not wealthy, and you never will be, until you stop waiting and start becoming. But I'll say this gently, because I know it's not easy. You were trained to wait. It was passed down, reinforced, rewarded. So walking away from it won't feel natural. At first, it'll feel reckless, irresponsible, even scary. But sometimes, freedom starts with a quiet rebellion, not of protest, but of perspective. And that's where we'll go next. We'll talk about what it means to step out of waiting and into becoming someone who doesn't depend on a paycheck, because they've learned to create something better. But for now, just sit with this. You weren't born to live from deposit to deposit. You were born to plant, to build, to own, and somewhere inside you, you've known that all along. You ever notice something? The people who live paycheck to paycheck, they're often the most disciplined-looking folks you'll meet. They wake up early. They follow routines. They stick to schedules, meet deadlines, clock in, clock out. They even set alarms on Sundays just to prepare for Monday. But for all that order, there's still chaos underneath, because the routine they've mastered isn't freedom. It's dependence. Wearing the mask of discipline. You see, structure is a beautiful thing, but not when it becomes a cage. You were never meant to serve your routine. Your routine was meant to serve you. And when your entire life orbits around a salary, what day it arrives, what bills it covers, how long it lasts before you tighten the belt again, then the structure you're so proud of is quietly stealing your power. It feels responsible, doesn't it? Budgeting, managing, being realistic. But if your budget only stretches far enough to survive, not to invest, not to build, not to change your circumstances, then all you've done is decorate your limitations. You've mastered survival, but not growth. You've learned how to stay afloat, but not how to sail anywhere. That's the trick of the salary waiting mentality. It rewards you for being a good employee. It praises you for managing just enough. It keeps you busy, obedient, tired, and somehow always broke. It's like being on a treadmill with a paycheck hanging just out of reach. You run harder. They raise the bar. You adjust. They raise it again. And year after year, you look back and wonder, how did I work this hard and stay exactly where I started? I'll tell you how. Because you were taught to measure your life by the size of your salary, not the size of your ownership. So you wait for raises that barely beat inflation, for bonuses that vanish with one hospital bill, for promotions that demand more of your soul for the same old ceiling. And all the while, you tell yourself you're doing the right thing because you're being disciplined. But let me ask you something. What if your discipline is keeping you poor? What if the very routine you follow was designed to keep you dependent, to keep you tired, to keep you obedient, to keep you too occupied to ask deeper questions? Because a man who is always waiting is rarely building. And a man who's always watching the calendar for his next deposit rarely stops to ask, why do I need to live like this at all? There's a line Jim Rohn once said, don't just get through the day, get from the day. But most people don't get anything from the day. They just get through it. From 8 to 5, from Monday to Friday, from bill to bill. And that's not living. That's not progress. That's just existing under a system you never questioned. You may think you're being responsible, but if responsibility means forever depending on one stream of income, then maybe it's time to redefine the word, because real responsibility is learning how to build something that lasts beyond a paycheck. Something that works when you don't, something that grows when you rest, something that feeds you, not because you waited, but because you planted. That's the kind of discipline no one taught you, because no one taught them. Your father did his best. He told you to get a job, stay loyal, work hard, because in his day, that was the way. But the world changed. The system changed. And now the same loyalty gets you laid off without warning. The same hard work gets you nowhere faster. So ask yourself, if the game has changed, why are you still playing? By the old rules? You think you're being careful, but you're really being caged. You think you're being steady, but you're really stuck. And stuckness wears many costumes. One of the most dangerous? Routine. Especially when that routine is built around waiting. Waiting for a boss to approve your value. Waiting for a deposit to decide your peace. Waiting for a break that never comes. My friend, let me say it plain. You can live by the clock, or you can live by creation. One makes you punctual. The other makes you powerful. You can keep showing up on time, or you can start showing up for yourself. The world has plenty of well-behaved workers. It needs more awake builders. And waking up means asking what you've never dared ask. What if I stopped waiting for money and started creating it? Not just through a side hustle, not just by cutting lattes, but by thinking different. Valuing yourself different, behaving like someone who doesn't need to wait anymore because they've become the source. That shift doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with seeing the truth that the structure you were proud of may not be yours, that the salary you wait for may not be worth the time you're giving it, and that the discipline you cling to may be the very thing chaining you to a life you no longer want. So before we go deeper, I'll leave you with this. Discipline without direction is just devotion to a dead end. And your life is worth more than that. You weren't born waiting. No child enters the world afraid to ask, afraid to try, afraid to want. No child begins life thinking, I'll wait for someone to tell me when I can have what I need. But somewhere along the line, you learned to wait. Not just in lines or offices, but in life itself. Wait your turn. Wait for instructions. Wait for permission. Wait until it's your time. And one day, without noticing, you found yourself waiting for a paycheck, as if survival was something you had to earn every 2 weeks. You think it's your fault. But I'll tell you the truth. You were trained not by evil people, but by a system that needs obedient participants more than it needs free thinkers. From the time you were young, you were rewarded for following the schedule, for sitting still, for raising your hand to speak. You were praised for showing up, not for questioning what you showed up for. They gave you grades for memorizing answers, but never taught you how to ask better questions. And slowly, without resistance, you were folded into a system that said, if you behave, if you perform, if you wait patiently enough, we'll give you just enough to get by. You didn't rebel, because no one around you did. Your parents were waiting. Your teachers were waiting. Your neighbors, your friends, all waiting on something outside themselves to change their lives. So you followed the pattern. You got the job. You accepted the terms. You learned how to wait well. And society called that success. You see the trap? You weren't just taught to work. You were taught to wait. To wait for a company to value you. To wait for a boss to notice you. To wait for a raise. to wait for retirement, to wait for the right time to live. But while you wait, time DOES and single quotes D. Bills don't. Inflation doesn't. Life DOES and single quotes T. And the people who stop waiting, who dare to question the rhythm, they're called reckless at first, but later, they're called free. You know why the system trains you to wait? Because a man who waits is easier to manage. He's predictable. He's safe. He won't ask for more because he's too busy counting down to the next deposit. He won't build his own thing because he's too tired from building someone else's. He won't challenge the rules because the rules are all he's ever known. And you can't fight what you've been trained to depend on. So the game continues. You give your time. They give you money. Just enough to keep you from walking away, but never enough to let you truly leave. That's the genius of it. It's not slavery. It's a softer chain, made of comfort, security, and fear. Fear of losing that one source of income. Fear of stepping into the unknown. Fear of becoming your own source, because that kind of freedom, it takes courage. It takes clarity. And it takes a kind of awakening that most people never reach. They'll live their whole lives on a leash that they call a career path, and no one will stop them. Because no one sees the leash anymore. It's just normal, but you're not here for normal, are you? You wouldn't be listening this far if you were. Somewhere deep in your bones, you know you weren't meant to wait your way through life. You were meant to create, to lead, to design your days, not just endure them. And yes, it'll take unlearning. You'll have to let go of old beliefs, old comforts, old routines that made you feel responsible, but quietly robbed you of your possibility. You'll have to ask questions like, what if I didn't wait for my boss to give me a raise? What if I created value that people paid me for? What if I stopped trading time and started building assets? Those aren't easy questions. They'll shake the foundation you've stood on for years, but better a little shake now than a collapse later. Because here's the quiet danger. If you don't change your pattern, your children will inherit it. They'll watch you live in fear. They'll see you shrink during hard months. They'll learn to wait, just like you did. And the cycle will continue. Well-dressed, well-behaved, well-meaning, but still poor. Not poor in money, always, but poor in freedom, poor in ownership, poor in vision. And you have a chance to break it, not by running away, not by quitting your job tomorrow, but by seeing clearly. By realizing that a salary is not a savior, it's a tool, a starting point. Not a finish line. So use it. Don't worship it. Let it fund your future, not become your future. Start asking, how can I take what I have and build something that pays me back? Start small. Start simple. But for heaven's sake, start. Because once you see how deep the waiting runs, you'll never want to live in line again. Next time, we'll talk about what it actually looks like to break free. Not in theory, but in practice, in mindset, in movement. For now, just ask yourself, what are you still waiting for? So what does it mean really to break free? It's a fine thing to say, sounds bold, even inspiring. But for most people, that's all it ever is, a phrase. Because freedom, when you've lived your whole life waiting, doesn't feel like freedom at first. It feels like risk. It feels like foolishness. It feels like walking without a map, in shoes that never touched unfamiliar ground. You've been told to wait so long that moving ahead without permission feels like rebellion. But here's the truth. breaking free doesn't start with quitting your job. It starts with quitting the belief that your paycheck defines your worth, because the real chain isn't your employment. It's your dependence. It's the quiet fear that says, if this stops, I have nothing else. And as long as that fear runs your life, you will stay small. You will stay obedient. You will stay poor, even if the number's in your account say otherwise. So let's be clear. Breaking free doesn't mean walking away from responsibility. It means walking into a higher one. The responsibility of owning your time, your value, your mind. And that starts almost always with a simple, uncomfortable truth. I've been waiting too long. Longer than you admit. Longer than you're proud of. You've been waiting to feel ready, to feel safe, to feel certain. But those feelings never come. Because they're not delivered. They're built. You want the fear to go away first. But it doesn't. You move with the fear, or not at all. That's what most people don't understand. They think freedom is a door someone else has to open, a raise, a windfall, a lucky break. But real freedom? It's built brick by brick. In secret, in silence. While the rest of the world keeps waiting, you break free the moment you stop asking, how much can I earn? And start asking, what can I create that earns without me? That's the shift. That's the seed of wealth. Not effort. Ownership. Not hustle, leverage. And it won't come from your boss. It won't come from your government. It won't come from the next election, or the next policy, or the next raise. It comes from you. It comes from the moment you decide, I will not wait anymore. You'll still go to work, perhaps. You'll still show up, but something inside will be different. You won't live for the paycheck. You'll use the paycheck to fund your plan, to buy time, to buy tools, to buy space to think. That's the first move, not to quit, but to reclaim your time, inch by inch. You stop spending it all. You start saving. You start learning. You begin building something in the hours no one pays you for. An idea, a skill, a small thing that grows, slowly, quietly into a stream of its own. At first, it won't look like much. It won't impress anyone. But it will do something your paycheck never could. It will whisper, you're not trapped anymore. And that whisper will keep you going, even when it's hard. Even when it's lonely. Even when you're tempted to just go back to waiting. Because at least waiting is familiar. Don't single quotes T. Because the longer you wait, the harder it becomes to believe in anything else. The salary waiting mentality doesn't just rob your bank account. It robs your imagination. It convinces you there's only one way, one stream, one ladder. But life is not a ladder. It's a field. And while you're standing in line for the next handout, others are planting. They're building gardens, not begging for fruit. They're investing in skills, not hoping for favors. They're owning their hours, even if it means less comfort at first. And slowly, almost invisibly, they outgrow the system entirely. They don't brag. They don't boast. They just don't need to wait anymore. And that's real wealth. Not millions in the bank, but freedom of mind. Freedom of choice. Freedom of time. So if you're still in the early stages, if all you've done is whisper, there must be more than this. That's enough. That whisper is sacred. Follow it. Don't silence it with overtime. Don't drown it in weekend comforts. Don't bury it under fear dressed up as responsibility. Start where you are. Look at your time like a resource. Look at your habits like seeds. And ask, what am I growing here? Because whether you mean to or not, you are always planting something. You're either planting dependence, or planting freedom, and you'll harvest whichever one you've been feeding. So let this be the moment you choose different. Not because someone told you to, not because I said so, but because deep down, you know it's time. You've waited long enough. There's something you lose when you live your life waiting for money. And it's not just time. It's not just missed opportunities, or compound interest, or even freedom. It's something quieter, harder to name, but far more costly. You lose belief. Not all at once, not in some loud collapse, but slowly, silently, like a candle flickering out in a room no one's watching. You stop believing that things could ever really change. You stop believing that wealth is for people like you. You stop believing in your own voice, your own value, your own possibility. Because when you wait long enough, you forget that you were ever meant to move. And I've seen it. I've seen strong men shrink, smart women doubt, bright souls dim down to match the gray rhythm of their pay cycle. They don't dream anymore. They manage. They survive. They say things like, "It is what it is. I just need to make it to Friday. Maybe next year." But maybe next year becomes next decade. And by the time they look up, it's too late to start planting what they never believed they could grow. That's the real cost. Not just the dollars you didn't save, but the vision you stopped holding. And the world is full of people who gave up their power quietly, not because they weren't capable, but because they were trained to wait, and no one ever reminded them they could build. So let me remind you, you can build, you can create, you can take the same energy you've been using to survive and turn it into something that sets you free. But here's the hard truth. You can't do that while living like money is your master. You can't do that while your peace rises and falls with every deposit. You can't do that while you hand over your calendar and your confidence to someone else's system. You have to decide, at some point, that you will no longer live like an employee of your own life. You will not wait to be told what you're worth. You will not wait to be allowed to breathe. You will not wait to feel safe before you move, because if you wait for safety, you'll never move. And the salary waiting mentality, it feeds on that. It says, just hold on. Just keep your head down. Just wait until you're ready. But nothing changes while you wait. Do you understand that? Nothing. No one is coming to shift your trajectory. No job will ever pay you what you're truly worth. No raise will rescue you from a life designed to keep you depending. And yes, it's a design. Don't think it's an accident that your expenses grow with your income. Don't think it's chance that school never taught you about ownership, or passive income, or creative leverage. They taught you just enough to participate, but not enough to break free. And so you wait. But freedom doesn't come to those who wait. It comes to those who build while they wait, who use every free hour not to escape, but to plant. Who treat every dollar not as survival, but as a seed. Who dare to say, my future will not be a reaction to my past. And that takes belief. Not borrowed belief. Not hyped up motivation. Real belief, quiet, stubborn, grounded. Belief that says, I don't have to live this way anymore, even when the bills are loud, even when your friends don't understand, even when your family tells you to be grateful. Not ambitious, you hold the belief anyway, because if you lose that, you lose everything. You can live without a title, without a raise, without praise or applause or recognition, but you cannot live well without belief. Belief in your value, belief in your agency, belief that your life is yours to shape. And that's what the waiting robs from you. Every time you say, I'll try next year, that belief fades a little more. Every time you say, I just need this paycheck to come through, you hand a little more of your soul to something outside your control, and one day, you wake up not just broke, but disconnected from the part of you that once dreamed. So, ask yourself, what is your waiting costing you? Not just in money, but in vision, in aliveness. Enjoy. What would your life look like if you stopped waiting for money to tell you when to breathe? What kind of person would you become if you built belief into your daily rhythm instead of just bills and budgets? It doesn't take much to begin, just one step. One new way of seeing, one decision to stop waiting and start becoming. Because the future belongs to those who plant, even when the soil looks dry, even when no one is watching, even when they're afraid. And maybe you are afraid. That's fine. Fear doesn't mean stop. It just means you're standing on the edge of change. Don't turn back. Step forward. Because the cost of waiting is far too high. And the life you want will never come on a paycheck. It comes when you take your belief back and begin again. You know what keeps most people trapped in the salary waiting mentality? It isn't greed. It isn't laziness. It isn't even fear. It's something trickier. Something more seductive. Security. That word sounds noble, doesn't it? I just want a stable job, a reliable income, something safe. But here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. Most people don't chase freedom because they've been taught to worship security. They were told security is the goal. Not growth, not ownership, not self-reliance. Just security. A house with a mortgage, a job with benefits, a routine that doesn't rattle the system too much. And so they trade their time for a sense of safety. They trade their dreams for a dependable routine. They give up becoming in exchange for predictability. But what if I told you the security you cling to isn't security at all? What if it's just a softer name for dependence? Because how secure are you, really? If your entire life stops the moment your paycheck does? How secure are you if one manager's decision can erase your income overnight? How secure is a life where you need permission to take a vacation, or ask for a raise, or spend time with your kids? That's not security. That's submission. And yet, it's everywhere. People stay in jobs that drain them because at least it's stable. They hold on to paychecks that barely cover their lives because at least it's something. They silence their discontent with phrases like, better safe than sorry. Don't fix what isn't broken. At least I'm not unemployed. But what if the very thing you think is keeping you safe is what's keeping you stuck? What if your comfort zone is quietly killing your potential? I've seen it more times than I can count. Good people, capable people, people who could have built something lasting, staying small because they confused certainty with security. But those are not the same. Certainty is external. It says, I know what's coming. My paycheck arrives on Friday. My hours are set. My benefits are listed in a handbook. Security is internal. It says, no matter what happens, I know how to think, how to build, how to adapt, how to provide. One is borrowed, the other is earned. And most people? They never earn true security. They settle for certainty. Because certainty is handed to them, packaged nicely in a job offer. It doesn't require vision, or risk, or the hard work of self-trust. But the moment life throws a curveball, a layoff, a medical emergency, a family crisis, that certainty shatters. And they realize they never had security at all. Just a fragile routine that crumbles under pressure. So let me ask you, which one are you building? A life of borrowed certainty, or a life of earned security? Because one will keep you dependent forever. The other will teach you to trust yourself. Again. And no, that kind of trust doesn't come easy, especially not when you've been trained to believe that safety comes from a paycheck, that value comes from a job title, that worth comes from being needed by a system that would replace you in a week. But once you see the illusion, you can't unsee it. You begin to question. You begin to wonder what it would feel like to build something of your own, to have multiple streams, to create value that lives outside a salary. At first, it feels impossible. Who has the time, the energy, the certainty? But that's the shift. You stop asking for certainty and start asking for capacity. You stop needing guarantees and start building skills, ideas, assets. Something that pays you back, not because you waited, but because you planted. And slowly you begin to realize security was never in the paycheck. It was never in the job. It was never in the routine. It was in you. In your ability to think clearly, to manage your emotions, to take action when it's easier to stay passive. Security is not found in staying still. It's found in becoming someone who knows how to move, no matter what. That's real safety, because the world will always change. Markets crash, industries shift, companies fold. But a person who knows how to create will never be poor for long. So let this be your moment. Not to panic, not to throw everything away, but to awaken. To realize that you've been sold an illusion, that your desire for stability was never wrong. It was just misdirected. You don't need a bigger paycheck. You need a stronger foundation. One that isn't tied to one person, one place, one job, but one that lives inside you, and you can begin building that today, quietly, intentionally, without applause. You don't need to tell the world. You just need to decide. I will not spend my life worshiping the illusion of safety while letting my real power die in the waiting. You know the truth now. And truth, once known, becomes a responsibility. Not a burden, but a key. Use it. You ever notice how most people get nervous when you talk about money outside of a job? Start a conversation about business, they say, that's too risky. Mention investing, they say, I don't understand that stuff. Talk about building something of your own, and they change the subject altogether. It's not because they're not smart. It's not because they don't care. It's because they've been trained to believe that one stream of income, a salary, is all they can handle. And that is one of the most dangerous beliefs you can carry. You see, living off one stream of income is like trying to live off one lung. You can breathe, but barely. One small problem, one hiccup, one accident, and everything stops. Yet, this is how most people live. All their bills, all their dreams, all their security, tied to one job, one company, one decision maker who doesn't know their child's name. That's not stability. That's a silent trap. You walk into it slowly. Just until I save up. Once the kids are older. Maybe next year I'll start something on the side, but next year becomes 10 years. And 10 years becomes a lifetime. And suddenly, you're 60, still depending on one stream that might not be there tomorrow. Let me tell you something simple and hard. No wealthy person relies on just one stream of income. Not one. Even those with jobs, they build assets. On the side, they invest. They own. They create. Because they know, when you only get paid from one place, you are one bad day away from crisis. But when you plant more streams, you sleep differently. You walk differently. You speak with calm, not because you're arrogant, but because you're not afraid. And fear. That's what keeps most people stuck with just one stream. Not laziness. Not lack of opportunity. Just quiet fear. Fear of starting small. Fear of looking foolish. Fear of failing. And that fear keeps them in a loop. I need to make more money. But they do nothing new, so nothing changes. And then the next month comes, and they wait again. Always waiting. Waiting for a raise, waiting for a bonus, waiting for someone else to increase their value. But your value was never supposed to come from a company. It was supposed to come from you, from what you learn, from what you build, from what you give to the world. Now, I'm not saying quit your job tomorrow. I'm not saying throw it all away and start a business out of thin air. I'm saying begin thinking differently, even just a little. Ask yourself, what skill do I have that could help someone? What knowledge do I carry that others would pay for? What problem do I know how to solve? Start there. Start with 1 hour a day. Start with one small idea. Start with one offer, one sale, one stream. Then build. Slowly, quietly, faithfully. Because no one will hand you multiple streams. No one will tap you on the shoulder and say, now's the time to build your own. You must decide. You must say, I will not spend my entire life depending on one faucet. When I have the power to dig a well, it doesn't have to be big. It just has to begin. You can write, teach, consult, make, sell, design, organize, coach, fix. There is no shortage of needs in the world, only a shortage of people who believe they can meet them. And that belief, that quiet shift, is where new streams begin. The first dollar you make outside your paycheck will feel different. It will feel earned, not given. And that feeling will do something to you. It will tell you, I can build. I am not trapped. I can create value even if no one hires me. And suddenly, you don't fear the economy the same way. You don't panic at layoffs. You don't feel powerless. Because you've got more than one source, more than one flow, more than one way forward. And the beautiful thing, the more streams you build, the more generous you become. Because you're not clinging to survival anymore. You're not living in lack. You can give, share, uplift, support. You stop asking, how can I make ends meet? And start asking, how can I help others rise too? That's wealth. Not just in money, but in mindset, in spirit, in rhythm. So if you're still living off one stream, don't shame yourself. You're not behind, you're just waking up. Now, plant a second stream, then a third, then a fourth, not to show off, not to prove anything, but to honor the quiet truth that your life is too precious to hang on one thread. You are not a paycheck. You are a builder. And today is a good day to build. It's strange, isn't it? You come home after a long day. You didn't lift anything heavy. You didn't run a marathon. But you feel drained, like something invisible took all your energy. It's not your body that's tired. It's your spirit. Because living paycheck to paycheck is not just financially exhausting. It's mentally and emotionally exhausting too. You see, money is not just about what you can buy. It's about what you can breathe when you have too little of it. You feel like you can't exhale. Like there's always something hanging over you, a bill, a deadline, a fear. And fear, left unchecked, becomes fatigue. The kind of fatigue that no nap can cure. Now here's the quiet truth. People think they're tired from working. But most people aren't just tired from the hours they work. They're tired from how they think about money. Let me explain. When you're living with a salary-waiting mentality, your entire life becomes a countdown. You count the days until payday. You count the money before it even hits your account. You count what you owe, what you'll have left, and what you can't afford. You're always calculating, always adjusting, always worried. That's not living. That's surviving, and surviving takes more energy than thriving ever will. When you're surviving, your mind never rests. Even when you're off the clock, you're not truly free. You're budgeting in your head. You're wondering how to stretch what little you have. You're hoping nothing unexpected happens. You sit at dinner, but you're not there. Your body's eating, but your mind is racing. And over time, that kind of strain, it wears you down. It makes you impatient, snaps your temper, steals your laughter, erodes your hope. And worst of all, it convinces you this is just how life is, that adults are supposed to be tired, that money's always tight, that one day things will change if you just keep working. But working harder isn't always the answer. Not if your thinking stays the same, because no matter how much money you make, if you still live in fear, if you still depend on one stream, if you still trade time for every coin, you will stay tired. You will stay trapped. You will stay stuck in that loop where you wait for payday and then wait again. Let me tell you something, gently. You were not designed for financial anxiety. You were made to create, to contribute, to rest, to move freely. But a salary-waiting mindset keeps you in a cage where none of that feels possible. Even if the bars are made of comfort, a steady check, a predictable life, a quiet routine, it's still a cage. And that's why it exhausts you. Not because you're weak, not because you're ungrateful, but because a part of you knows there's more you can do, more you can become, more you can give, but you can't reach for it while your hands are tied to a cycle. So what's the way out? It starts with a shift, a mental shift, from waiting to creating, from earning to building, from hoping to planning. It begins when you stop seeing your job as the only source and start seeing yourself as the source. When you say, I don't want to just survive until Friday. I want to live with purpose every day. That's when your mind starts to rest. That's when peace begins to return. Because real rest doesn't come from sleeping in. It comes from no longer living under constant financial tension. And no, it doesn't happen overnight. But it begins the moment you decide to think differently. That's the power of truth. It won't deposit cash in your account, but it will wake you up. It will show you how much of your exhaustion comes from fear, how much of your delay comes from waiting, and how much of your power has been outsourced to a job title. You don't need to quit your job to find peace. But you do need to quit waiting for someone else to give you permission to build. You do need to release the lie that you'll feel better when you make more. Because without new thinking, even more money just means bigger stress. More income doesn't fix tired thinking. Only awareness does that. And awareness? That's what you're doing now. You're watching your own life from a distance. You're seeing the patterns that wear you out. You're tracing the fatigue back to its root. And the root isn't just hours worked. It's hope deferred. It's dreams delayed. It's creativity suffocated by routine. But the good news? You can change that. Not by trying harder, but by thinking wider. Start planning peace into your days, even while you still work the same job. Even before the extra income comes in. Start saying, I refuse to live in fear of money. I refuse to let my worth be measured in paychecks. I will not wait another year to take my life seriously. And then rest, not because everything's perfect, but because you finally see the truth. You're not tired because you work. You're tired because you've been waiting, and now you're done waiting. You're ready to live. There's something I've seen over the years, a quiet difference between those who stay poor and those who grow rich. It's not just about work ethic. I've seen broke men who work from dawn to midnight, and I've seen wealthy men who take walks in the morning and read books after lunch. It's not just about intelligence either. I've met brilliant people who live broke their entire lives, and simple men who built wealth slow and steady, with no degree and no titles. So what's the difference? Builders versus earners. Most people live as earners. They trade time for money. They wait for payday. They do what they're told. They live within someone else's frame. But the wise? They become builders. They build ideas. They build systems. They build skills that compound. They build streams, not just paychecks. They don't live life waiting for the 1st or the 15th. They live in seasons, not salaries. You see, an earner thinks, how can I make enough to survive? A builder asks, how can I create something that lasts? And that changes everything. Now, don't get me wrong. We all start as earners. We work the job. We wait for the money. We feel the squeeze of the calendar and the rent. But the question is, do you stay there? Because here's the danger of staying an earner forever. You become trapped in a story that doesn't belong to you. You follow orders. You suppress ideas. You shrink dreams down to what's realistic. And before you know it, you've spent 30 years building someone else's future, while you're sat in the corner gathering dust. Earning is honest, but building is wise, because when you build, you shift from waiting to planting. You plant seeds that won't pay you today, but will feed you for years. A skill you sharpen, a business you begin, a habit you stick with, a relationship you nurture. These are slow things, quiet things, but they compound in ways a paycheck never will. Let me ask you, have you ever met someone who worked for decades, earned faithfully, retired, and still worried about money? Now ask yourself, have you ever met a builder, someone who created assets, systems, or ideas, and watched how peace followed them, even in their older years? It's not luck. It's structure. The earner plays defense. The builder plays offense. The earner survives. The builder expands. The earner asks for permission. The builder gives themselves permission. And here's what's quietly tragic. Most people have builder dreams, but they live with earner habits. They want freedom, but spend all their energy waiting for a raise. They want peace, but refuse to think beyond the job. They want growth, but never set time aside to build what matters. It's not because they're lazy. It's because they were never taught how to think like a builder. No one told them that waiting for money makes you dependent, but building money makes you free. No one taught them that wealth isn't about how much you earn, but about how much continues to work while you rest. No one taught them that waiting is passive, but building is spiritual. Because when you build, you start honoring time. You realize you won't always have your health. You won't always have your energy. You won't always have this moment. So you use what you have now. And that is wisdom. Jim Rohn once said, "Don't wish it were easier, wish you were better." That's a builder's mindset. It says, instead of waiting for the job to pay more, I'll learn something valuable. Instead of complaining about my schedule, I'll wake up early and plant seeds. Instead of dreaming of someday, I'll start now, quietly, consistently, seriously. You don't need $1 million to think like a builder. You just need a shift from passive to active, from waiting to working, from chasing to choosing, because here's the truth, earners can be replaced. But builders leave legacy. An earner leaves when the job ends. A builder leaves behind value, ideas, systems, habits, impact, and you were born to build, even if no one told you. Even if school taught you to follow, not create. Even if your parents only knew how to earn and survive. You can begin again, not by quitting everything overnight, not by throwing away your job, but by shifting how you think about time, effort, and purpose. Start building in the margins. Build your skills after work. Build your vision early in the morning. Build your mindset through books, mentors, and quiet study. Brick by brick, bit by bit. Until one day, what you've built starts to carry you, and you realize, I'm not waiting anymore. I'm not hoping anymore. I'm not counting down to payday. I'm building a life I don't need to escape from. That's the turn. That's the shift. That's when the exhaustion fades and the future begins. There comes a moment, a quiet one, no spotlight, no applause, no big announcement. Just you, alone with the truth. You sit with your coffee, or maybe your thoughts before bed, and you feel it. This life of waiting, of barely getting by, of chasing paydays. It's not for you anymore. It may have served a season. It may have kept food on the table. But it cannot carry you into the life you were meant for. Not because it's evil, but because it's too small for your spirit. And that's when you know you're ready to step out of the salary cage. Now listen to me. This exit isn't loud. It's not reckless. And it doesn't always mean quitting your job tomorrow. No. This kind of exit is first an inner one. You stop thinking like someone who trades time for money. You stop begging for raises. You stop waiting for permission. And you begin to claim ownership of your life, your time, your value. Because value is the real shift here. Not what someone pays you. Not what they say you're worth. But what you decide to build, give, and become. You see, poverty often starts as a financial state, but it lingers because of a mental one. And one of the deepest forms of poverty is believing your income depends entirely on someone else's decisions. That's the cage. You wait. They decide. You work. They measure. You live. They give. And one day, you wake up realizing you've handed your power to a system that was never built to make you free. That's the cruel trick of the salary life. It gives just enough to keep you comfortable, but not enough to make you free. Now don't get me wrong. Some jobs are a blessing. Some people work under leaders who encourage growth, creativity, freedom. But for most, the job becomes a routine. The routine becomes a trap. And the trap becomes a life. That's why this isn't about quitting the job. It's about quitting the mentality. The salary waiting mentality says, I just hope they notice me. I hope I get a raise next year. I can't do anything until I get more money. I'm stuck and I don't have a choice. But here's the truth. You always have a choice. Maybe not to leave your job today, but to leave behind the thinking that keeps you small. You can start learning something new. You can build something on the side. You can write, create, serve, sell, offer in ways that light you up again. You can stop waiting and start planting. That's the first exit. And often, the most important one. I've seen men walk out of six-figure jobs and still be broke inside. I've seen women raise families while building businesses quietly from the kitchen table. I've seen teenagers take a skill and turn it into freedom before they even graduate. So, don't let the world tell you what's possible. The salary waiting life keeps you looking outward. But the builder's life starts inward. It asks, what gift have I buried? What value have I ignored? What idea have I talked myself out of? What dream have I postponed for the sake of security? And once you ask those questions honestly, you start to feel a flicker, a shift, a gentle rebellion against the way things have always been. And that's where life begins again. Jim Rohn used to say, profits are better than wages. Wages make you a living. Profits make you a fortune. But I'll tell you what's even better than profit. Freedom, the kind that lets you wake up when you're rested. Work on what you believe in. Say no when something doesn't feel right. And live by design, not by demand. But here's the secret. Freedom doesn't arrive all at once. It's earned through steady building. It's protected through discipline. It's grown through years of quiet decisions, and the first of those decisions? To stop waiting. Stop waiting for the perfect time. Stop waiting for someone to believe in you. Stop waiting for the next paycheck to finally change your life, because no amount of money will ever free a mind that still waits to be told what to do, but a mind that decides. A mind that chooses to build, to learn, to give, to grow. That mind can create wealth, even in silence. So what now? You don't need a master plan. You need a moment of clarity. This one, right here, where you see the truth. I have lived too long waiting for someone else to change my life. I have given too much of my power away. But starting today, I will build. Quietly, faithfully, fully. You don't need to rush. You just need to begin. And if you stay consistent, the life you've been waiting for will become the life you wake up to. Not because someone gave it to you, but because you chose to build it. It's funny, isn't it? You come all this way, chasing money, only to realize in the end, it was never really about the money. Not truly. What you were chasing was peace, control, the feeling that your life belongs to you, the number in the bank account. That was just a symbol, a stand-in for something deeper. You wanted to stop feeling small, stop being afraid, stop asking, will it be enough this month? You wanted to breathe, not just on weekends. Not just after payday, but every day. And maybe for a long time, you thought the paycheck would give you that. And it did. For a while. But slowly, quietly, you noticed something. The more you depended on it, the more it controlled you. Your time, your decisions, your energy, your dreams, even your dignity. Sometimes. It started telling you where you could go, what you could buy, when you could rest, whether you could say yes or no, and that's when the fog lifted. That's when you saw it clearly. I'm not free, I'm just funded. There's a difference. A man can be paid every month and still feel poor. A woman can earn a decent salary and still live in quiet panic. Why? Because the paycheck doesn't solve the real problem. The real problem is dependence. Dependence on something outside yourself to tell you what your life is worth. You wait for your employer to decide. You wait for the system to notice. You wait for the economy to turn in your favor, but that's not freedom. That's a leash with a longer chain, and the worst part? It feels normal. You look around and everyone else is doing the same, waiting. For Friday, waiting for bonuses, waiting for retirement. But deep down, you weren't made for waiting. You were made to create, to contribute, to choose. And that's why this awakening matters. Not because it tells you to hate jobs, or salaries or structure. No, that's not the point. The point is to reclaim your role in the story. To stop thinking of yourself as a passive character, and start seeing yourself as the builder, the author, the source. Because once you see that, once you feel that, you can never go back to sleep again. You begin to see opportunities where others see obstacles. You start to ask better questions. How can I serve in a way that brings value? What can I learn that multiplies over time? Where am I still waiting when I could be creating? These questions don't just shift your income. They shift your identity. You stop being someone who works for money. You become someone who makes it with your mind, your hands, your gift. That's the deeper transformation. The poor man waits. The rich man works. But the free man builds. And if you take anything from all of this, let it be that you were meant to build, not in a hurry, not to prove anything, but because your soul was designed to grow, expand, create, and the salary waiting. Life. It doesn't ask you to build. It asks you to behave. To stay in line, to follow rules, to hope for a little more next year. But now that you've seen the truth, can you really go back? Can you honestly say you're satisfied living a life where someone else determines your worth? If you're like me, the answer is no, not anymore, because you've seen the cracks. You've heard the quiet voice in your own chest, the one that says, there's more. There's something in me that's still asleep, and I'm ready to wake it up. So what do? You start small. You give up waiting. You build one habit. You create one stream. You reclaim 1 hour a day. You treat your time like gold, because it is. And little by little, you leave the waiting behind. You stop hoping for freedom and start choosing it, not in some dramatic leap, but in slow, steady steps. One day, you'll look up and realize the cage is behind you, not because it disappeared, but because you grew beyond it. And when that day comes, when the money is flowing, when your time is yours, when your value no longer depends on a monthly check, you'll smile, not because you finally made it, but because you finally understood. It was never about the money. It was always about becoming someone who could live without fear. And that is the real wealth. One day, you'll wake up, not to an alarm clock, not to dread, not to that heavy feeling in your chest that used to come every Monday. You'll wake up in stillness. The air will feel different, lighter, and you'll realize you're not rushing anymore. Not after a number, not after approval, not after the next check. You'll walk into the kitchen. Maybe the coffee's already brewing. Maybe the sun is slipping through the curtains just right. And for the first time in a long time, you'll feel wealthy. Not rich in the way the world screams about cars, watches, numbers, noise, but rich in the way that matters. Rich in time, rich in clarity, rich in the kind of quiet that comes when you're no longer afraid. It will hit you then. This is what it was all for, not the money itself, but the man you became on the way to it, the way you stopped waiting, the way you took responsibility, the way you learned to build, to create, to stand on your own 2 feet. There's a confidence that grows in a man who no longer waits. It's not loud. It doesn't need to prove itself, but you'll feel it. In the way you say no. In the way you protect your time. In the way you walk into a room without shrinking. That's the real wealth. Not the income. Not the applause. But the peace that comes from knowing I can take care of myself. I can create what I need. The world doesn't teach that. The salary system doesn't reward that. But the truth has been waiting for you all along, and now you see it. You see that real power doesn't come from depending on someone else to feed you. It comes from learning how to plant, how to tend, how to harvest from your own effort. You no longer beg for time. You no longer hope for raises. You no longer fear the economy's tides. You've built something more solid than that. Your mindset, your discipline, your vision, and maybe most of all, your ability to say, no more waiting, my life is mine. That's rare. That's rich. And if I could leave you with one thing, one quiet truth to carry forward, it would be this. The world will try to convince you that dependence is safety, that if you just keep your head down, play it safe, wait your turn, you'll be okay. But okay is not the same as free. Okay is not the same as alive. Don't settle for survival when you were born to build. Don't confuse comfort with peace. They're not the same. Peace doesn't come from paychecks. Peace comes from alignment, from living in truth, from walking through the world with your head up and your heart open. And that life, it's still available, no matter your age, no matter your background, no matter what you've lost. You can choose. It's slowly, deliberately, daily. Not by chasing money, but by stepping into who you really are. So if this voice has stirred something in you, don't silence it. Follow it. If it's made you uncomfortable, good. Let that discomfort be your doorway. Let it shake you awake. You've waited long enough. Now it's time to build, time to choose, time to live. Not just for the money, but for the quiet kind of rich. The kind that lets you sleep well at night. The kind that lets you look your children in the eye without fear. The kind that lets you breathe. If this spoke to you, pass it on. Someone else is still waiting, and they need to know. They don't have to.